The pen felt heavier than it should have. Vivian Calloway told herself it was just paper, just a signature. She'd signed hundreds of documents in her 12 years as a structural engineer, contracts, approval forms, liability waivers. Her hand never shook for any of those. But the notary was watching, and her soon-to-be former husband was watching, and his lawyer was watching, and Vivian's hand would not stop trembling. She signed anyway. Cole, no, Donovan. Donovan Ashworth. She had to stop calling him by his middle name, the one she'd used since their second date, when he told her his first name made him feel like a grandfather. He wasn't her Donovan anymore. He was the man across the mahogany table in a Bay Street law office, in a suit that cost more than her first car, not looking at her. She slid the papers across. He took them without a word. Outside on King Street, Toronto was doing what it always does in November. Gray and cold and completely indifferent. Vivian stood on the sidewalk with her portfolio case in one hand, and the single box of things she'd cleared from the office they used to share. Shared, past tense. Everything past tense now. And she couldn't remember where she'd parked. She stood there for 4 minutes before she realized she'd taken the subway. She'd met Donovan Ashworth at a fundraiser for the Sick Kids Hospital 7 years ago. He was 34, already running his family's real estate development company, Ashworth Group, with a quiet confidence that she'd mistaken for depth. She was 31, newly promoted to senior engineer at Hartley & Ford, and she'd impressed him by correctly identifying the structural flaw in a renovation he was describing at a cocktail party. He'd laughed and said she was the first person who'd ever made load-bearing walls sound interesting. She should have known, looking back, that a man who'd never been interested in how things were built probably wasn't interested in what it took to hold them together. They married 2 years later. A small wedding outside of Stratford, Ontario, at a property his family owned. Vivian wore her mother's earrings. Donovan cried during the vows, which she'd thought was a sign of something true. The first 3 years were good. Or she'd told herself they were good. There's a version of yourself you perform when you're in a marriage that's starting to show cracks. You become very skilled at not looking directly at the cracks. Then came the Montreal project. Donovan's company had landed a major mixed-use development contract in the Griffintown neighborhood. He needed an engineer on the inside he could trust, so Vivian joined the project. She worked 18 months on it. She redesigned a foundation issue that would have cost his company $11 million and a brutal lawsuit. She presented the solution in a boardroom of 20 people, and the room went quiet with the particular silence. That means everyone in it knows they're watching someone who knows exactly what they're doing. She'd looked across the table at Donovan, expecting to see what she'd seen in the early years. That quiet pride, that specific look he used to give her. He was texting. She found out about Petra Voss 4 months later, not through any dramatic discovery. No lipstick on a collar, no intercepted message. She came home early from a site inspection, and the apartment had a feeling, a different. She walked into their bedroom and knew, the way you sometimes just know things, that someone else had been there. She didn't say anything that night. She spent 3 weeks making herself certain before she said anything at all. When she finally asked him, directly, sitting at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, with both of them still in work clothes, he didn't deny it. He looked out the window at the Toronto skyline for a long moment and then said, "I think we've grown apart, Vivian?" She almost laughed. She actually had to press her lips together to stop it. "That's not what I asked," she said. "I know," he said, and that was almost the whole conversation. Petra Voss was 26 years old. She was a brand consultant. She had 400,000 followers on Instagram, and the particular kind of beauty that photographs like money looks. Vivian found the public account and looked at it once, for exactly 3 minutes, and then closed the app and put her phone face down on the counter and stood in her kitchen for a long time not thinking about anything. What Vivian did not know, when she sat across from Donovan in that Bay Street office and signed the divorce papers, was that she was 11 weeks pregnant. She had been tired for weeks, but she'd attributed it to stress and late nights, and the particular exhaustion of watching your marriage dissolve in slow motion. She hadn't missed a period so much as she'd assumed the irregularity was her body's reaction to everything else that was happening. She was 37 years old, and she'd always assumed getting pregnant would require more effort than it apparently had. She found out on a Thursday afternoon at a Shoppers Drug Mart near her new apartment in Leslieville. A one-bedroom that was clean and full of light, which she'd told herself was enough, which was a sentence she was saying about a lot of things at that point. She sat on the bathroom floor with the test in her hand for a very long time. Then she called her sister. Her sister, Rowena, drove from Oakville without asking any questions, except, "Have you eaten?" and showed up at 9 o'clock at night with Thai food, and a specific expression on her face that meant she was not going to say anything obvious. They ate on the floor because Vivian hadn't bought a kitchen table yet. Rowena didn't cry, and she didn't tell Vivian what to do, and she didn't say anything about Donovan. She just stayed until 2 in the morning and then said she'd come back on the weekend. Vivian didn't tell Donovan. Not yet. She needed to understand the shape of the thing before she introduced it to someone who would immediately try to reshape it into something that served him. What she did, in the 2 weeks after she found out, was consult a lawyer. Not the firm she'd used for the divorce, a different one. A woman named Kowalski, who specialized in family law and had the kind of direct, unhurried manner that made Vivian trust her within 10 minutes. She laid out the situation. Kowalski laid out the facts. The divorce settlement had been finalized, but a child changed certain calculations. Not all of them. Not the way Vivian might have hoped. But some. "You should have disclosed the pregnancy before the settlement was signed," Kowalski said, not unkindly. "I didn't know," Vivian said. "I believe you," Kowalski said. "That will matter," she told Donovan by email. She wrote the email 4 times before she sent it. The final version was 11 sentences long and contained no emotional language whatsoever. She stated the facts. She noted that she was retaining legal counsel. She asked him to respond through his lawyer. He called her 20 minutes after she sent it. She didn't answer. He called 3 more times that evening. She listened to the voicemails. In the first one, his voice was carefully controlled. In the second, less so. In the third, he said something about wanting to do right by her that made her set the phone down very gently on the counter and walk to the window and look out at the street below for a long time. Donovan Ashworth had not wanted to do right by her when he was sending texts he deleted from his phone. He had not wanted to do right by her when he'd handed her a settlement offer that was, as Kowalski would later describe it, aggressively minimal given the duration and contribution of the marriage. He had not wanted to do right by her when his legal team had included a non-disclosure clause about the Montreal project, her solution, buried in the agreement. She had signed it anyway. She had been tired and sad and not thinking with the part of her brain that usually ran the calculations. She wasn't tired anymore. She was something else now, something that didn't have a clean name but felt a great deal more useful. The Ashworth Group had an annual gala every February. It was held at the Fairmont Royal York, and it was the kind of event that got a page in Toronto Life. Vivian had attended every year for the past 6 years as Donovan's wife, and had spent most of those evenings talking to contractors and investors and city planners while Donovan worked the room. This year she received an invitation because her firm. She had left Hartley and Ford and joined a smaller practice, Morrow Engineering, where she was now a partner, was listed as a structural consultant on one of Ashworth Group's upcoming builds. The invitation was addressed to Morrow Engineering. Her name appeared on it. She almost didn't go. She spent 2 days deciding. In the end, she went because she was 5 months pregnant and she had bought a very good dress, and she was tired of making herself smaller out of consideration for someone else's comfort. She walked into the ballroom of the Royal York with Gwendolyn Park, her business partner, and they got drinks. Sparkling water for Vivian, champagne for Gwen. And they had been there for approximately 11 minutes when Donovan appeared with Petra Voss on his arm. Petra was wearing white. Her collarbones were extraordinary. She looked at Vivian with the particular expression of a woman who has been told about you, but thought she was prepared and is discovering she wasn't entirely. Donovan looked like a man who had made a miscalculation and was not yet sure how significant it was. "Vivian," he said. "Donovan," she said. There was a pause in which several things happened simultaneously. Gwen took a small step sideways, so she was half a step behind Vivian instead of beside her, which was either solidarity or self-preservation, and possibly both. Petra placed her hand on Donovan's arm, and a man slightly to Vivian's left said, "Viv? Vivian Calloway?" She turned. He was tall, somewhere in his early 40s, with the kind of face that had lived in it. Not conventionally handsome, but specific, interesting, with dark eyes and a way of standing that suggested he was very comfortable with exactly how much space he took up in a room. He was holding a glass of water, no ice, and he was looking at her with an expression of genuine recognition. "Harlow," he said. "Fletcher Harlow. We were on the Brampton Transit Hub review panel together 4 years ago. You were at Hartley then." She did remember. He'd been the representative from an infrastructure investment firm. He'd asked better questions than anyone else in the room. "Of course," she said. "You're with Aldgate Capital," he said. "I run my own fund now, are you?" He glanced briefly and without any particular drama at her stomach. "Congratulations, thank you," she said. Behind her she heard Petra say something quiet to Donovan. She didn't turn around. Fletcher Harlow, as she learned over the following hour, and then over several subsequent conversations over the following months, was 41 years old, had grown up in Halifax, had spent a decade in infrastructure investment in Vancouver before returning to Toronto, and was the kind of person who read structural engineering reports for the specific pleasure of understanding how things work. He had no patience for performance and a great deal of patience for everything else. He didn't ask about her marriage. He asked about the Montreal project. He'd read about the foundation issue in a trade publication. And she found herself explaining the solution in more detail than she had to anyone outside of a professional context, and he followed every word. She did not let herself think anything about Fletcher Harlow for a long time. She had, she felt, demonstrated poor judgment in the area of her personal life, and she was not in a position to trust her own readings of people. She focused on work and on the apartment she was slowly making into something that felt like hers. A kitchen table, finally, and bookshelves, and good light through the east-facing windows in the morning. She focused on the small person growing inside her, whose existence had stopped feeling like a plot complication and started feeling like something she'd been moving toward for a long time without knowing it. In March, Donovan's lawyer contacted Kowalski. Donovan was seeking shared custody. Vivian read the letter 3 times. The child hadn't been born yet. She was 7 months pregnant and could not sleep on her back anymore, and had started having very vivid dreams about bridge tolerances, which Rowena said was both on brand and possibly worth discussing with her OB. She called Kowalski. "He has the right to apply," Kowalski said. "You knew he might." "I knew," Vivian said. "I didn't think he would." "He didn't." She stopped. She was going to say he didn't seem interested. But that wasn't a legal argument. "He didn't have any involvement during the pregnancy," she said. "Document everything," Kowalski said. "Every contact attempt he made, every one he didn't, every appointment he wasn't at. I want dates, times, records." Vivienne had records. She had kept records because she was an engineer and she documented things by professional habit, and because some part of her had suspected this particular calculation would be needed eventually. Her daughter was born in April at St. Michael's Hospital. Rowena was there. The birth was long and then very sudden, which Rowena later described as exactly like Vivienne in every meeting she's ever been in. Vivian's mother flew in from Victoria. The 3 women stayed at the apartment for the first 2 weeks, rotating in a quiet, efficient rhythm that Vivian found unexpectedly sustaining. She named her daughter Josephine. Josie, most of the time. The name had belonged to Vivian's grandmother. Donovan sent flowers to the hospital. He did not visit. He sent a message through his lawyer asking about next steps regarding access. Kowalski responded on Vivian's behalf. Fletcher texted she'd given him her number at the gala, for a professional reason she no longer remembered, to say congratulations and ask if she needed anything. She wrote back, "We're good, thank you. She has a lot of opinions already." He responded, "Sounds like she has the right role model." She left the conversation there, sitting warmly in her phone, and didn't overthink it. The custody application moved through family court the way these things do, slowly, with paperwork at every turn. Kowalski was excellent. She documented Donovan's lack of prenatal involvement, with the same methodical precision that Vivian had used to redesign that Montreal foundation, building this from the ground up. What emerged in the filings was a picture that Donovan Ashworth probably hadn't intended to create. He had made 0 contact during the pregnancy beyond the initial phone calls. He had not attended a single medical appointment. He had not inquired about the birth until 4 days after Josephine arrived, and then only through a lawyer. He had offered, through that same lawyer, a financial arrangement for the child that Kowalski described as inadequate. His lawyer argued that he'd been kept at a distance. Kowalski introduced the phone records. All 22 unanswered calls from Donovan in the first weeks after the pregnancy disclosure. Most of them late at night, none of them followed by any formal written communication, none of them containing anything that could be characterized as a concrete plan or commitment, had been replaced, within 6 weeks, by complete silence. Then the custody application. The family court judge was a methodical woman who asked precise questions. She looked at the record of Donovan's involvement with an expression that was entirely neutral, in a way that did not seem favorable to him. Vivian sat in the courtroom and felt, for the first time in over a year, that the math was going to work out. It was also around this period that the Montreal situation resurfaced. A journalist named Whitfield, Callum Whitfield, at the Globe and Mail, had been investigating Ashworth Group's development practices, specifically a series of projects where the engineering credits had been attributed to internal Ashworth staff, rather than the external consultants who'd actually done the foundational work. The Montreal project was on the list. Her name was on the original stamped drawings. The non-disclosure agreement covered what she could say to competitors and other clients. But Kowalski, who had reviewed it with renewed attention once the custody battle started, pointed out that it said nothing about court records or regulatory filings. Vivian didn't talk to Whitfield, but Kowalski could confirm, in a court filing, which documents bore Vivian's engineering stamp. Public documents, regulatory filings, things that had never been covered by any agreement. The Globe piece ran in September. It was careful and thoroughly sourced. Vivian's name appeared 3 times, twice in the context of the Montreal project, once in a quote from a former Ashworth Group contractor who said she was the best structural mind I've ever worked with, and she didn't get the credit she deserved. Donovan gave a statement through a spokesperson saying the company stands by its record. Petra Voss posted 3 times that week on Instagram, all of them about a trip to Lisbon. None of them mentioned Donovan. By the time the custody decision came down in November, Josephine was 7 months old and had recently discovered the specific joy of grabbing Vivian's hair with both hands and holding on with a determination that suggested she was going to be very good at negotiation. The judge awarded Vivian primary custody. She noted the lack of prenatal involvement, the pattern of disengagement, and the nature of the initial contact attempts. She allowed for a supervised access schedule for Donovan, with a review in 6 months. It was not the complete exclusion Vivian had, at her lowest and most frightened moments, hoped for. But it was something close to justice, arrived at the way justice usually does, incrementally through documents and patience. Donovan did not appear personally at the final hearing. His lawyer read a statement. Vivian appeared personally. She wore a dark blazer and the earrings she'd worn on her wedding day, her mother's earrings. And she answered every question the judge asked with the same directness she'd used in that Montreal boardroom. When it was over, she walked out into the November cold, which was doing exactly what November in Toronto always does. And she stood on the sidewalk and let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. Rowena. Well? She typed back. She's ours. 3 minutes later, another message, from a different number. Heard the decision. For what it's worth, good. Are you and Josie free Saturday? Fletcher. She looked at the message for a moment. Josie was currently at Rowena's, where she had spent the morning charming everyone in a radius of several feet. Vivian had a full Saturday ahead of her that contained no plans except the kind of quiet that had felt necessary for a long time, and now felt, maybe, slightly less necessary. She typed back, we might be. The following spring, Morrow Engineering won the contract to lead structural design on a transit expansion project in Hamilton, the largest contract in the firm's history, by some distance. Gwen called it a vindication. Vivian called it a Tuesday, which was the day they signed the papers and made everyone in the office coffee, and let Josie, who had come in with her that day, and was now 12 months old and in full possession of opinions about where she wanted to walk and what she wanted to pick up off the floor, toddle around the boardroom while they celebrated. The Hamilton project was publicly announced. Trade press covered it. One of the industry publications ran a profile of Vivienne and the firm, and the writer asked, with the slightly careful tone journalists use when they're not sure they're allowed to say something, whether the Globe piece about Ashworth Group had had any effect on her career. "I did good work," Vivienne said. "I documented it. The record exists." She thought about the notary's office on Bay Street, the way the pen had felt in her hand, the way Donovan had taken the papers without looking at her. "I had to let some things fall apart," she said, "to see what was actually load-bearing." The writer used that line as the pull quote. It ran in bold at the top of the page. Fletcher saw it and texted her a photo of the magazine with the line circled. Below it, he'd written, "Told you." She looked at the message and felt something settle quietly in her chest. Not an ending, but the opposite. The kind of thing that holds weight without making any noise about it. She put the phone in her pocket and went to find her daughter.